Yeah.
Carrie, do you agree with that?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, no,
Russ, do you agree with that?
Yeah.
Well, this fight sucks.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's a sensible position, right? Like, I don't think it's that wild. I mean, like, the comments will differ. Some of the comments will differ, right?
Welcome back to the Nerd Nest, everybody. We've got a full crew. We've got tons of stuff to talk about. We've got the leaked Steam controller. Rich and I sat down and interviewed the founder of Bazzite. We'll have that in the middle of this episode. We've got an update to Valve's lawsuit. Nintendo is preparing to sue a lot of people, it seems like. But first, we wanted to talk about some deals because we've got the autumn Steam sale right now, and it's Black Friday. We're recording this on Friday. So we figured we would share a few of those things. And I want to start off with Russ. We'll just do the autumn Steam sales first, and then we'll come back to the other kinds of deals later on. But did you find any games on the autumn Steam sale that jumped out at you?
Yeah, I used myself as my own metric. Like, what was low enough where I'm like, all right, fine, I'm going to pull the trigger, you know? And the two that I thought of was Ghost of Tsushima and then Final Fantasy 16 in particular. Final Fantasy 16 is, I think, $30-something. Like, it's crazy. Like, how... I'm going to open it up here in a new tab, but I think it's $37. Yeah, $37.49 for Final Fantasy 16. And I think that's it for me. Like, so I'm like, all right, that's a price I am willing to pay for. And so that was the big deal for me, like the fact that it kind of met my own metric. And so, yeah, that was mine.
Very cool. What about you, Rich? Did you find anything on sale? You just told me you didn't find anything on sale. I'm sorry.
Well, I can share something. So
okay.
I haven't gotten too deep into the sales yet, but so I haven't actually pulled the trigger on anything. But one thing that caught my eye, and this is weird because it came up in an ad on like X, and I never click on like Twitter ads. But it's called Shotgun Legend. It's only 49 cents. It was normally 99 cents, so it's like 50% off. And it looks like original Legend of Zelda, but with a shotgun. So like you have those like nice chunky pixel art dungeons, but you're just shooting things with a shotgun. So I don't know if it's any good yet. The reviews are 90% positive, and there's like 800 plus reviews, so it should be pretty good. But I'll find out, and I'll let you guys know when I try it.
Can't go wrong for 40 cents.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. What about you, Carrie? Anything jumping out of the... Did your wallet hide, or was it too late?
I did pick up a few things. The one thing that is not like a deal that is not much to talk about, but I never bought just because I had on Game Pass, and that's the Halo the Master Chief Collection. And the only reason I got that is because of the Steam community mods, the workshop mod, to play the E3 version of Halo 2. And I was like, yeah, all right, I'll just kick in $10 just for that.
Yeah.
So I do want to pick up that. I think if I had to pick some, Hades 2 looks like it's at a decent price, even though it's still like kind of in early access. I would want to just piggyback on what Russ picked up, and the price on Final Fantasy 16 I feel like is aggressive for Square Enix for the price for it for so early on its release. So if you were the type of person that was a Final Fantasy fan, that price looks like it's like, you know, a compromise from Square Enix. Like, hey, we're going as low as we think we can go on this, and I think that's, in terms of a deal, if you wanted something, I would jump on that one.
Yeah, if I didn't already have it on PS5, I would absolutely pick it up for $36 on Steam, because what I did play of it, I did enjoy. It's just that I stopped playing it to play something else, and then when I came back to it, I was like, shoot, I don't remember how to do anything, and I don't remember the story, and so I had to start over, and the idea of starting over was not something I was interested in. So there it sits, waiting for me to finally get up the gumption to start over again. And another game where I ran into this is the game that I found that's on sale, and that's, I don't want to say the original Tomb Raider, because it's not the original one. It's the Tomb Raider that kind of rebooted the series, and it's just called Tomb Raider. It's $2.24 right now, which is ridiculous. It's 85% off. It's a really, really good game. I don't know, I probably got like 15 hours into it at some point, and then I stopped playing for a bit, and then the last thing that I did, like Lara Croft is standing there like on this ledge, and I have to figure out how to traverse this canyon or whatever, and I don't remember how to play. So I have to start over if I want to
I hate
play
that.
this game again because I just I cannot remember what I'm supposed to do
There's
because it's been so long.
there's a few games that definitely happens to me, and
Yeah.
I commiserate. Where that's why I don't mean to jump in you, but there's a thing where it's, I know they have a few hours at any given week to put to his video games, and the thought of like, okay, I have to put in this, but then there's other games that are kind of in my wheelhouse of what I want to play. I put that one off even further. Like Baldur's Gate 3, I got wiped. My party got completely wiped when I was up in the air going to Type A, and I was like, "F this game!" Closed it and just shoved it away. And Baldur's Gate 3 is a game that I want to get back to, but it's like I need to have like a week or two off just to like, okay, it's just Baldur's Gate 3 time. But that's how I feel like it is. Like if you can't just gun through it, sometimes just the time is too much.
Yeah, before we started recording, Kerry was talking about playing Astrobot, and he was saying, he was saying stuff about like the it's 7 hours and he's almost done with the game. And for me, I'm like, that's freaking perfect.
Yeah,
I
it's
don't
great.
want to play games that are longer than that because I
Love
don't
it.
have the attention span or the time to commit to them.
Yeah.
But anyway, $2.24 for Tomb Raider, ridiculously good deal. And I'll have links to all of this stuff down below. And speaking of links, Russ, you said that you found something that was on sale for a really good price. What was that?
Yeah, so Best Buy's got a lot of the handheld PCs at good prices, and I think, I mean, the ROG Ally X is $100 off. I think that's great, but the original ROG Ally Z1 Extreme, so the good one, is $500, and at that price, I'm like, okay, that is really good because it was what $750 or whatever when it first came out, and it was good value at that point, I think too. And so to get that screen, to get that chip, and to get a handheld, I think that is really competent and no SD card issues anymore. All that stuff I think is great, especially buying it from Best Buy because if something does go wrong, just take it back, And I like that kind of security, in buying it. And yeah, the battery sucks. Like it's still not any better. They didn't upgrade that. That's not a firmware update. But everything else is good. And for $500, I think that's a pretty competitive price point.
So with the ROG Ally at 500 and the ROG Ally X at 700, Rich, which one would you buy? Given the option to pick up either one.
Yeah. Well, for me, bias is not the right word, but like, I really didn't use the ROG Ally at all. Like, I thought it was a really good handheld, but then the ROG Ally X, I'm exclusively using that, right? So like, I'm very opinionated on the matter because that battery difference was just so big for me that it completely flipped the equation, right? Like I use the ROG Ally X all the time, so like the price for the ROG Ally at 500 is incredible, and so like if you think that battery is good enough for you, then you should get that. But for me, the battery was that important. Where, now I would spend the extra couple $100 for that battery.
What about you, Kerry?
So there has been some pretty decent mods for it where you can get like a 72 watt hour battery that's also made by Asus. So you just buy like a eBay battery and then it just clips right into it. And I don't even think you need to mod the back of it for this one particular one. But there was an update just like a week ago. Someone just had like a 74 watt hour battery, and that's pretty close. So
close.
if you can get the battery is like $50 on eBay or whatever. So price wise, it's not that bad, but then you don't have the extra 8 gigs of RAM either. So you will have VRAM contention issues, especially for more modern games where that does alleviate a lot of issues. So there's just like a lot of little things that the Ally X does better, and it's just an overall better package. But at 500 for the Ally, that is still really good. And I think if you were to explore ways that you could increase the battery, that might be worth it. But yeah, so you could probably split it somewhere. Split it somewhere.
Especially if you're playing games that are not super demanding power-wise. Like if you're playing, little indie games like Animal Well, you could play that all day on the Ally, and for $500, that's a really, really good deal. Were you about to say something, Russ?
I was just going to note that the Legion Go is also the
Yes.
512 gigabyte model is also $500. So that's
Yes.
$200 off. So if you're a screen bro, like you want to get your good 8.8 inches or whatever, like I'm not a fan of the controls, but I mean, as a tablet that you could use, and then also, you know, like they're 3D printed grips that make it a lot better. That is a steal as well. Same chip. And so, and I think the battery is a little bit bigger on that one too. So.
Yeah, I
Yes.
think that one has a 50 watt hour battery, if I
Yeah.
remember correctly.
Yeah, that's the Lenovo Legion Go is like a Bazzite special. So is the LAX, right? But the
Yeah.
LAX, I feel like it's a better Windows machine just because of, and I bring this up all the time, but the native landscape display EDP is better for Windows. Where Bazzite, it's not going to care. It's like, okay, whatever, native portrait. But Lenovo Legion Go is that. So going to Bazzite, and also the back buttons get mapped as Steam input stuff now
Yeah.
on the Lenovo Legion Go on Bazzite. So it's like, I don't know, if you were thinking about just making that Steam OS like, that's also really good. Especially with that giganto screen and the Joy-Cons, I would probably recommend the Lenovo Legion Go at that $500 price. Yeah.
Yeah, that screen is fantastic. Carrie, did you find something else that's on sale elsewhere that people might be interested in?
No, the only ones that I recommended was just Hades and Final Fantasy 16, just piggybacking on what Russ said. Hades 2 specifically.
No, I meant not a Steam game, like just other things
Oh,
that are
so
on sale right now.
yeah, so if you just follow Wario 64, like the new Legend of Zelda, where you play as Zelda, that's like $30 on Woot. So I was like, man, $30, I gotta get it. The only reason I didn't get it is because it's the Southeast Asian version, which it doesn't matter because it's region free, but because I'm a Switch collector, I'm like, I'm thinking too much on that, so I'm like, I'll wait for the Nintendo version to get a little bit cheaper. But there's a lot that is on sale for like original first party Nintendo games. A lot of them are $40. For PS5, there's a lot as well. I saw Demon Souls for $30. I saw Rise of Ronin for $30. Astrobot is $42 on Amazon. I had to do a QVC special with a coupon to get it for $40. So there's a lot going on. If you were just looking at Xbox, I don't know how many people are going to do it, but because there's so many Game Pass devalues games. So just go into that in the mindset. If a game was on Game Pass, if you go on GameStop, those games are going to be like $10 or like $7 used. So they're like crazy cheap, and a lot of Game Pass games are good. So those are the only general ideas that I could rattle off.
One other Steam game that I forgot to mention, Uncharted Legacy of Thieves, is $20. So that's Uncharted 4 plus the Lost Legacy one, which I still haven't played.
I still got to play Lost Legacy. I played Uncharted 4. It was okay, but I got to go through Lost Legacy.
It is a good game, but it takes a long time to get through. It's a long game. And so I actually enjoyed my experience because it took me about a year to play it, just on and off, you know. And it's one of those, thankfully, I don't have to remember the controls because they're all very easy.
Right.
And so that was, and for $20, that's crazy. You know, I did that on the PS4 years ago. And so I think that's totally worth it for that price.
Did you find anything else that's on sale, Rich?
No, but I do want to recommend just the deal trackers, right? I think it's psdeals.net for PlayStation games, gg.deals
Yep.
For like Steam games, or is there any deal for Steam games? And decodeals.net, I think, for like Switch games.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like there are some really good deal trackers out there that'll tell you like, yeah, these games are historical lows. It's as low as you can get them for. And I usually use that stuff, so I love that.
It's always like the guilt-free way of getting stuff. Like, oh, historical low. All right,
Right? Exactly.
I'm in. You're like, because then when you get it, you're like, okay, I got it at a good price, and whatever happens, I'll play when I get to it.
Yeah, for sure.
The 8BitDo Ultimate Bluetooth controller comes with a dock and all that stuff is currently 33% off on Amazon, so it's only $46 for one of these, and it's a really good controller. It's not my favorite controller, but for $46, unbelievably good deal.
Yeah.
So
Don't I have one?
definitely recommend that.
Is the same one you say Ultimate? Yeah.
Yeah, it's the 8BitDo Ultimate Bluetooth, although I guess that 8BitDo needs to figure out some kind of naming convention for their controllers, because you go on their website, and I'm like, I don't know which one I'm looking at here. They all say 8BitDo Ultimate this or that. It is very confusing.
So many.
Yeah.
All right. Speaking of controllers, let's talk about the leaked steamed controller that everybody's been talking about lately. It came out, I think it was like Wednesday or maybe it was Tuesday, and it's got those trackpads. It's, got two thumbsticks. It's got face buttons. It's got a D-pad. Looking at it, I'm like just looking at the shape of the inputs. I can definitely see how somebody at Valve, if this is real, put their thumb down and they did that sweep back and forth like we saw on the Steam Deck prototype videos where they had like a poster and it had like a human thumb and like the arc where people would reach. And if you look at the controls on this alleged leaked Steam controller, everything looks like it's within that arc. The thumbstick is in the middle, the control the touchpad is on the bottom, and then the face buttons are up on the top, and then the left hand side is basically just the opposite. It's got the trackpad on the bottom, the joystick in the middle, and then the D-pad up on the top. And I think that this could be really comfortable, especially if it's focused heavily on the stick, and then you can use the touchpads to do just that weird touchpad stuff that you usually can do on the Steam Deck that you can't do on anything else. So I'm very excited about this as a possibility. Sadly, it's Bradley says that he has sources that have said that they are in the stages of tooling for mass production for this thing.
Wow.
Maybe none of this is true. Who knows? Rich, what do you think about this?
Yeah, so you had a couple like qualifiers there, right? Like allegedly and all this stuff, right? So I do want to give a little bit of background there. So this leak came from Steam VR drivers, the latest set of Steam VR drivers. So this is a real render model that was really in Valve drivers, right?
Yeah.
So that's number one. So first of all, why was it in Steam VR drivers? What does Steam VR have to do with this? That's one question that can come up. The second piece is that those sources, before any of these leaks, and he told me about this a little bit well before these leaks, that not Ibex, he didn't tell me so much about that one, but he told me that, yeah, there's a Steam controller that Valve is working on that sources have told him about. And then what happened was a week before this latest leak, there was another leak, right, with the codename Roy and the codename Ibex and some of the inputs that were there. And so as part of that leak, he kind of revealed that like someone has told me that there was a Roy and there was an Ibex basically. So this confirmed that these things existed. So basically it confirmed to him that his source was telling the truth, basically. So this controller in particular, I know that like we're looking at it and I've seen a lot of opinions about it. And, some people maybe either doubting the practicality or doubting sort of the comfort level. What I think is interesting about that is that, a lot of us felt the same way when we first saw the Steam controller or first saw the Steam Deck. And it wasn't until we got our hands on it that it was like, oh, this is not exactly like, this is better than I thought, right? Like, and then looking at the Steam Deck, like you kind of feel like, oh, it's, Carrie, you mentioned the D-pad dominant in your tweet, right? But looking at the Steam Deck, if you don't hold it in your hands, it looks a little D-pad dominant, right? But when you hold it, it's more analog stick dominant. So I wonder how this is to hold. I'm also going to share a tweet in the chat. If you want to share it during
sure.
the podcast, you can. But this is from Camp Creates, and a couple of months ago, Camp Creates said he's going to take the like innards of the Steam Deck controls and make a Steam controller out of it. And so now, because Valve released their not released, but they leaked their render model, he's like, oh, now's a good time to show you what I've been working on. And you can see it's literally just a Steam Deck, but in a controller format. And it kind of looks a lot like the Ibex, the one that Valve is officially working on. And so I can see, again, this to me looks analog dominant for sure.
The thing I look at when I look at Ibex and I look at the one from Camp Creates, my worry, like my thumb is not going to reach that thumbstick because it looks like it's a really far reach. But who like it's who knows? Like you can't prejudge that until you actually have hands on with it.
Yeah. I based on the renders and stuff, I would still. So for me, the the Steam Deck is like 90 degrees, right, to get the face buttons and the D-pad, and I feel like the Steam Controller 2, is tilted a little bit to get to the D-pad, at least just looking at it, and there's a weirder kind of like off angle to the analog stick. Not that my thumbs couldn't reach or anyone's thumbs couldn't reach, but when I look at that, I still believe in my core that they have them there for people to use them, but it's an inconvenience that you should actually be using the touchpads instead. Like this is a like you should actually be using the touchpads and also gyro, and that's the way you should be going about this rather than those analog sticks. And I don't know, that's just the way I feel, and I feel like Steam Controller 1 was also kind of in a similar vein where it was most comfortable on the pads themselves rather than anything else. So I don't know, I still get the feeling like that's the kind of driver out of it, but I can't what can we possibly say just looking at whatever we're looking at right now until we get it into our hands.
For sure.
Who knows?
And it's a it's a model, but unlike the other controller that leaked called the Roy, it's just like this little thumbnail model, right? So like the
Right.
proportions aren't necessarily scale. It's not necessarily an actual scale, and we don't have like a 3D render like a CAD file or an STI file. It literally is just like this little thumbnail thing.
Yeah, and when I look at it, it feels almost like there's almost a peak in the middle of the controller, and it slopes down. So it's instead of holding a controller where your hands are kind of flat like this, you'll be holding them with your hands tilted a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think that could be really comfortable,
Right.
possibly.
It's like when you look at those ergonomic keyboards, it's like split and like
Yes.
and you're looking at that and you're like, I'm sure that's comfortable, but I'm not using that.
It's
I
funny.
used one
I'm
of those
used-
for years. They were great.
Yeah. No, I don't go with them, and I don't fault them. I totally get it for a lot of reasons. Also, like people that use a trackball, so their hands just kind
Oh,
of
yeah.
sitting there and their thumb is moving. Yeah, exactly. So I totally get it. I'm not either one of those use cases. Mostly just stubbornness. Same reason I don't use gyro, right? Like I can like, oh, that's probably better. I won't use it.
I do really want to see the back of this controller. Like, I feel like that's
Oh,
going to
yeah.
inform a lot of it, because the Steam controller just, it doesn't look like you would expect on the back either. But can I just take a moment and pause and appreciate the fact that, like, just a leaked thumbnail of a controller gets us all four excited? Whereas, like, GameSir and 8BitDo release 10 controllers a year. But here we are, like, oh my gosh, look at those buttons, and it's like, wow, they got 4 of them, like, it is a new controller, yes, but like I'm very interested to see what they can innovate, and that's probably the thing that interests us, right? Is that like what are they going to do with it as opposed to just making a controller? This isn't the Hori pad. This is like something from them, and
Right.
what is it going to do? And
Yeah.
that's what gets me excited. How is it going to change the way I play games as opposed to just
Exactly.
like having great buttons? I mean, GameSir, to give you an example, like last month or so, I got a new controller from them. It's called the Tarantula Pro, I think. And it's basically like a PS4 controller, but it has the ability to swap the buttons on the face buttons. Like it'll change from Xbox
Oh, yeah.
layout to Nintendo layout. It's really cool. Like you push this button and it switches over, it makes a little gear sound and stuff. It should have a PlayStation icons, I think, because it's shaped like a PS4 controller, but that's neither here nor there. And so I was like, oh, I'll make a video about this at some point. And then the other day I got another one, and this one is called the Cyclone 2. And this one is like a really, really nice Xbox controller that has a nice stand. It's like a better version of the 8BitDo Ultimate almost, And so it's so fast that I can't even keep up with it. And I make 3 videos a week. Meanwhile, we've got this Steam controller, and it's like, it's such a big deal. And it's so funny because it's a controller. It's how we play games.
So I the only thing I would add to that argument, and not argument, like I'm in agreement, but I would say that when you take a look at the dominant console makers and Steam, they're the platform holder. They are the vanguard of what controllers matter, right? And everyone else that is making them are third-party controllers that are just doing the same thing that the forebears say, right? Like, so when the DualSense came out and we saw all the haptic stuff, we're like, oh, that's pretty awesome. But if like, game servers like, oh, haptics, and they're like, well, how are you going to do that? What game's going to support that? Like, what? Who are you? Like, no game developer's
Right.
like, oh, I got to support this game cert controller, but developers are going to be like, oh, I have to support the Steam controller too, and that's the difference, I think. So like when we see that, we know that there is this support wave that will follow behind it to do cooler stuff.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, maybe, because the thing is because of Steam input,
Right.
Valve doesn't need anybody to support their controllers. They just have to recognize the controller with Steam input. And so that's the one thing. Well, okay, that's not the one thing. That's one of the things that the HoriPad Steam has going for it, is it is officially recognized when you boot into Steam as its own thing. So all of the back buttons and the front buttons do those things that you otherwise wouldn't be able to do. So there are some controllers, when I plug it into my computer, Steam says, and it's hilarious when it happens, but it's like, this is not just an Xbox Series controller, but this, or an Xbox One controller. This is a 360 controller, even though it's not. And that means that it doesn't matter how many extra buttons that they put on it. I can't do anything with them without external software or without some weird workaround where I got to hold down a button on the controller in order to assign things. Just as soon as you put it into, as soon as Steam recognizes a controller as an actual thing, that makes it so that the devs don't have to do anything at all.
Right.
I can do whatever I want. And when you look at the original Steam controller, it fell on its face hard because people looked at it and they said, it doesn't have a D-pad and it doesn't have two sticks, and I am not willing to throw away money trying a controller that doesn't work the way a traditional controller does. This has all of the things that a traditional controller has, and it has the trackpads. And I think that that's the thing that could make trackpads go further. I know not everybody cares about the trackpads. I think that they're fantastic and incredibly useful, especially for playing games that aren't necessarily made for a controller from the couch. And that's why I'm excited about it.
I kind
Right,
of,
yeah.
one thing that I differ on between you and you, Bill, and you, Carrie, is that like I kind of feel like Valve is leaning away a little bit from trackpads. Like I feel like they have them there for like legacy, right? Like we know that there are games that will not work without trackpads, like 2005 era
Right.
real-time strategy games, right? But like overwhelmingly, more and more games are just supporting gamepads, and even like these sort of like RTS games. And so like I feel like Valve is like, we're going to keep them in there. We need them for just to support the entire library.
But legacy.
Yeah, but like, and then like for even for FPSs, it feels like Flickstick is starting to take over from trackpads. It feels like more people lean towards Flickstick than trackpads. Maybe I'm biased on that because I use Flickstick, but that's what it's beginning to feel like to me.
I will
Yeah,
say the
go ahead.
trackpads will probably work really well just in general when using a PC because so I took my ROG Nook that I had mentioned a few weeks back, which annoyed me about Marvel Spider-Man. I put it in a new room and I hooked it up with a different TV for the kids to use basically. And it's all programmed to basically, it's in Windows, but it'll start up. I don't have to log in. It'll just go right into Steam Big Picture. And so then they, like my youngest who's 8, he's just like, I want to play Sonic Forces and I'm not buying it for the Switch because I already have it on Steam. And so I'm like, just do it there. So anyway, he's going and he's playing it. And something happened. He touched something and the window got out of focus in Windows. And so now he couldn't, like, controller's not doing anything, right? And he's like, Dad, computer's broke. So I run over there and I like get a USB dongle, plug it in for my little touchpad keyboard thing that I've got so I can troubleshoot. And it just needed to be clicked on. That's all it needed, right? And a trackpad would do that. And so those little things I think are going to be great. And it's an ugly controller, but I would say it's no uglier than the Nintendo Switch Pro controller, which I think is just ghastly. And so, yeah, I think it's fine.
Yeah, that's a good point. There are going to be like little menus, and if you ever go to the desktop, you absolutely need the trackpads. Even just like typing, I like typing with the trackpads more than like hunting and pecking on the
That's
D-pad.
also like a thing that they always show. Like gyro, when you see people that are like sick at gyro, you're like, oh man, I should use gyro. And then you see people that are sick at just typing on touchpads, and they're
Yeah.
like, using two thumbs and like, and you're
Yeah.
like, how are? That's totally like rubbing your stomach and patting your head territory. Like, how are you drilling through? Because not only are they going through, they're also triggering on the back wherever they are, or pressing on.
Yeah, we're pressing on.
Yeah, so it's I don't know, that's a talent. That's a talent right
Yeah.
there. But yeah, I've seen people type fast as go nuts on that.
I feel like with this controller, if there are back paddles, I'm assuming there are, I'm gonna make one of them Alt and one of them Tab, so I can like Alt Tab, because that's the other thing is like getting the Windows. Because sometimes you launch a game in Windows with Steam and it won't actually focus it. Like Destiny 2 has a problem with that sometimes, and so that'll be a nice way to just be able to tab between them really quickly.
The Windows and desktop Windows Manager is just it's so like, oh, people are going to be at their desk with a keyboard and mouse all the time, every single time. No one will just have a controller. It's it's bad.
Do
Yeah,
you guys expect to use
Go
this on Windows PCs? Is that your plan?
I like, it would be like good. So even like I brought this up in our chat, right? Like Condemned, I actually still prefer playing on Xbox 360, so through 360 emulation. I'm still waiting for it to go on sale. I have the physical ones, just so I can buy the digital one. The menus and everything in the Xbox 360 one you can go through on a controller, but on the PC version you need a mouse to mouse in the menu. So you press escape and it's like, here you go, now you're using a mouse. Okay, press resume, now go back to your controller. And it's the most bizarre thing, but a lot of games from like 2008 and before operated like that. So that's like, to your point, Rich, not even just RTSs, but like sometimes you just need a mouse just to work on like a menu in an old PC game. So yeah, unfortunately it's the case, but yeah, for sure, using a mouse when you get out into like the desktop, for sure.
Yeah, I would probably on Windows you can basically say, all right, when Steam is not in focus and I'm not playing a game, switch over to this set of controls. And the thing that I would do is, Russ is saying I would bind the back paddles to Alt Tab. I would put all that shit on the left trackpad, because I never use the left trackpad for anything pretty much. And so you touch it, a menu pops up that has Alt Tab, Escape, Control Tab, all those things that you normally have to do when dealing with Windows. And you put your thumb on it, menu pops up, you mouse over to the correct place, you let go, and it executes that. So much better than having dedicated things just to the back buttons. And it changes depending on when you are actually playing a game and you might need to do that. And when you're not playing a game, when you're not playing a game and you need to do that, versus when you are playing a game, you might need to do other things. And that's just the power of Steam input. But he also says that there's the other controller, the Roy controller that Rich was talking about. It's different than other VR controllers. It has all of the inputs of a traditional controller.
Right. But shaped like a Quest controller.
Right.
Yeah. I'm excited for that one a lot.
Do you guys know why?
Why it's shaped like a Quest controller?
Why it has a D-pad? Why it looks like a traditional controller but on a VR controller?
I would assume so that you can play games in like flat mode in VR.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which is the same reason that the iBex is in the VR drivers, right? Like the whole Deckard idea seems to be that Valve is trying to sell you a Steam Deck for your face, right? Like it's not. It's the VR stuff is gravy, right? Like they're like, you can play your entire or almost entire Steam gaming library on a headset in a virtual home theater.
Can we talk about that for one moment? Can we? So, are we still of the belief that Deckard is full on all-in-one VR headset with high-powered thing in the headset, or is this going to be a streaming type of thing? So it's going to be using some type of ARM chip.
I expect that it's going to be ARM.
Right, and then there's the
it'll be streaming.
Right.
I also expect that it's going to be like dockable or something. Like can you maybe like, I don't know, not just stream, but like hardwire it to like Steam Deck, and like now you're like getting more of like the Steam Deck juice. You know what I mean? I
Well,
don't know.
I
that's
think
what
it'd be like the Wii U, where you got a
Exactly.
base,
Yeah,
that's hooked
so
up to a TV or a monitor or whatever, and then you also have the gamepad, which
right.
is a
Yes.
headset that you put on
Yes.
your dumb face.
So if yeah, right. So if we think about this, then you have the Steam machine or the Steam dock, and then the Steam Deck, right? Like
Yes.
so the Steam Deck 2 can also relay to this, but there could also just be the NUC version of the Steam Deck 2 that is the horsepower, the meat and guts of it, that also then just streams to the ARM base. We had this discussion a year and change ago when we were looking at different stuff.
Right.
I still
did.
think that that's the route, is that they use all the horsepower on like an ARM chip just to like extendo battery life and everything on it, and leave all the horsepower to the machine. Also because like the all-in-one thing is great, but wireless is so big. Like using Quest 3 on PC wirelessly is like the only way I play VR games. I can't stand having a tether at all. So I'm still hoping that this is the method, but it'll be interesting to see. Also, even if you didn't want to buy the Steam Deck 2, right? You could just buy the headset that streams and then work
Exactly.
off your PC. So I just think it's a better overall.
Yeah, the thing I'm pushing for with Steam Deck 2, like not pushing for, but just like really like wishing that this is what it was, is like a modular ecosystem, right? So like the Steam Deckard would be the VR headset. It could be standalone, but then you could also stream from a Steam Deck, or somehow connect to a Steam Deck. But then maybe they also do like, instead of a home console or a Steam machine or a deck box, maybe they do like an eGPU solution on with a dock, right? So like you dock it to an external graphics card, and that's like your third tier.
That's a challenge. That's a real hard
I
challenge.
believe it. I believe it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Easier said than done, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Russ, jump in there, man. What do you think?
I'm hearing you guys talk about all this stuff, and I keep thinking that this is like 3D TVs. Like they were really cool, and people were into it for a little bit, but it just never got so good that it took off. And I wonder, at what point does VR get so good that it will take off? Because it's
Right.
still a very small population, and I worry that there's going to come a moment where the money people are like, you know what, you got to stop. Like it's not getting there. Even if you make it better, there's not going to be enough interest, you know. And so I'm worried about that. I don't know. I got a Quest 3. I use it. I still haven't made a video about it. I got it for Christmas last year, and it's just not quite to the point where I'm like, all right, this is it. I want to tell people how wonderful it is.
Yeah.
Like it's just, it hasn't gotten there. And yeah,
Right.
I think that, you know, someone like Valve really pushing and keeping going with it, it's going to be great. But I wonder if it'll ever get past the enthusiast kind of space.
Right.
Agreed.
So
Yeah.
very very quickly on the 3D TV stuff, 3D was a huge fad. But having said that, when I went to Taipei, Acer had a 3D monitor that did eye tracking, and it is amazing. Like it is so good because it's keeping track of your eyes. So when you're looking at a game and you like literally move your head, the camera will, like the game will change so that you can like, so like in Street Fighter 6, which we were playing, you can like look around characters. Like you can like it's
Oh, that's awesome.
it's so cool to see
Like
it.
like the new 3DS.
Exactly, but
when
on a,
that came
on a
out.
big screen, and
Yeah.
like it just, it's like, oh, you're playing. This is the person I'm looking at. Here it is. This is 3D. Glasses free. There you go. And it just
How's it look for if you're like, what if you're playing
the-
a game and I sit down next
it
to
looks
you? What's
crazy.
it look like?
It's all like layered images.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So it's for a single person. They sell it as like a PC monitor, right? But it's glasses free 3D monitor that doesn't need 3D glasses. It just follows you, and it works so good. I was really super interested in it. I loved it a lot. But yeah, I totally agree with you, Russ. VR needs to get to the point that it is as easy to get into and get out of like your phone is. If you could imagine, like, you had to, you know, take out your phone and do a whole bunch of nonsense just to use your phone, no one would have used any phone, right? Like iPhone would never have taken off if it had a bunch of stuff. It needs to be seamless. So until that point gets there, it's going to be it's a challenge.
Yeah, I was really hoping Apple would kind of push things with that Vision Pro thing, but I mean, I used it. I'm like, okay.
They did. They
Really
pushed
expensive.
It pushed into your wallet.
All the way into your wallet.
Get that money out of there.
That glasses free 3D eye tracking stuff, by the way, that's what's in that vaporware handheld. The Intel 10 cent.
Right.
With 11-inch display, 100 watt hour battery,
It's absurd.
and never coming out. Yeah.
It's an absurd handheld, just like way too large.
Yeah.
But that glasses free thing, I guarantee, especially for a handheld, because you know it's only gonna be a single serving, right?
No, yeah, that's true.
It's so cool. You guys have to see it. It's like, it makes you a believer when you see glasses free 3D just like kick on.
Yeah.
The new 3DS I loved, right? And I always played games in 3D, but no one really cared as much. And there's a bit more to it. I don't know. I love it, but I also concede that it's enthusiast only.
I will say about that vaporware 11-inch tablet or handheld that you were talking about, in some of the maybe I laughed my ass off. In one of the marketing pictures that they had, like the guy's holding it in his hand, but he's resting it on a freaking couch on the side of the couch, and I was like, yeah, because he can't hold it up because it's huge.
It's humongous. It's insane. And then like detach the controllers, like I mean, sure, you know now you have like a big screen that you can use, but like I don't know, I'm not using this like a Switch. It's not happening.
Yeah.
All right, well, that's going to do it for the Steam controller. Rich and I sat down with Kyle Gospinetic, who is the founder of Bazzite, which you've heard of us talk about on this show a million times. So I'm going to run to that interview right now, and then when we come back after the interview, we're going to talk about an update to Valve's lawsuit. And I think that if I could control where we are on the screen, I would put other people between Carrie and Rich, because I think that the fists are going to go flying. So stick around for that. We'll be right back with more on the NerdNest podcast. We are here with Kyle Gospinetic, and he is one of the people who have been working at Bazzite. And the reason why we've asked Kyle to be on the show today is because both Rich and I have used Bazzite on our devices, and we're like big fans of it, and we wanted to give Kyle and Bazzite a platform to, you know, kind of talk about what it's been like to make SteamOS since Valve, for other hardware, since Valve says, well, we'll get to it eventually. And sometimes eventually, especially when we talk about Valve, sometimes eventually takes a really long time. And I got tired of waiting, so finally I installed it, and I was like, holy cow, this is great. Rich couldn't talk me into it. Kyle, how long did it take to get from the ideation of, I'm going to try this, to first boot, and you were like, okay, this is working?
Yeah. Well, first, thank you both for having me on. It's great to be here. Timeline-wise, right? Bazzite was kind of born out of my enjoyment of Fedora's Atomic project. They make this, great system called OS Tree that uses these cloud-native technologies to produce an OS. And Bazzite was born from me having, issues with SteamOS. I had been a big part of the SteamOS support community and Discord, just helping people like, how do I install my VPN? How can I get this particular web browser working? Any number of things. And I realized that as good as SteamOS's AB partition system is, Fedora already did this better. So the first version of Bazzite was really just, what would it take to port a couple of the SteamOS packages over to Fedora's packaging system and throw it in an image. I had that up and running within 3 weeks, I want to say, mostly thanks to watching George Castro's videos on the same topic. And from there, community interest grew. People came in and helped out where they could. And within about 6 months, we had what I would call a beta release of what Bazzite is today.
That's awesome.
So just in order to get the audience up to speed, because I'm going to fill in for them, because I'm not a developer. Rich is a developer. You're a developer. So my question is, when you talk about the Steam packages or the Valve packages, that first time that took you 3 weeks, what exactly do you mean by that? Just to get everybody on a base level.
Yeah. Well, SteamOS is a variant of Arch. So they take a snapshot of Arch Linux and they add their own secret sauce on top of it. That secret sauce is their packages. So they have the normal stuff that a lot of distros ship already, like GameScope. That's their display engine for what the game mode view is. And then they have more specific stuff. So there's a package for Jupyter hardware support. That's their code name for the Steam Deck that does all of the, BIOS updating or controller support and things like that. Or their dock updater. That's a package. Those sorts of things. That's what had to be ported over to Fedora. The stuff that they don't readily open source on their GitHub.
Okay, that makes sense. What were you going to say, Rich?
Well, I was going to say, you talk about it in comparison to SteamOS, which makes sense, especially as a starting point for you. But a lot of people that are installing Bazzite or thinking of trying Bazzite, they might think of comparing to like Chimera or Hollow ISO and things like that. And so I'm also just thinking about like your mindset when you first got started, right? Like the XKCD comic with the one more standard, right? Like there's 15 standards. I'm gonna write one standard to solve them all. Okay, there's 16 standards now, right? So like, what? I guess yeah, you answered part of that, but like, what motivated you to really think of your implementation with Bazzite as sort of different from the what existed so far?
Yeah. Well, two parts to that, right? Like Linux, I don't really see it as like a competitive space, For
Right.
everything that we built ourselves, we almost certainly took from someone else. Chimera made a GameScope session. We used it. There's no reason not to. Nobara had already kind of been the trailblazer for Fedora gaming improvements. We borrowed a lot from them. And I think, in turn, they've borrowed from us. Like all of these different Linux gaming distros share with each other, and we all
For sure.
grow over time thanks to that. But, difference-wise, right? We are, I think, still currently the only OS tree-based gaming image. And OS tree was, brand new tech. I would say that we were the first just because of timing. Um, and that's my main draw for why I built this. I
Yeah.
really like this model of operating system. I think the cloud native methodology has a lot of utility, both for letting people come in and make changes who are new to the whole scene and have maybe never contributed to an open source project to begin with, and for people who are already well in this scene. Cloud native is basically anything enterprise at all in the Linux space is going to be cloud native. So utilizing this tech the way we have just kind of opens us up for more contributions and makes it easy to work on for people.
Makes sense.
How,
Yeah.
how many people are working on it right now? Like you mentioned, it's easy for people to jump in. Do you know how many people are working, or is that, as somebody who's not a developer, maybe that's an unknowable thing?
It's well, all of our stuff is in GitHub, so you can look at it any time. Our core team is maybe 10 to 12 people,
Okay.
counting the Universal Blue folks, but we have, as of right now, 87 contributors. So it's well beyond our team making changes to it, and that's just what's visible in GitHub, of course, too, right? There's other stuff that we're pulling from the community where they didn't go through the effort of PRing it, but they gave it to us. So it's at least 100 different people have worked on Bazzite in one form or another.
That's amazing.
So
And-
when you go ahead, Rich.
Well, I was going to ask, you mentioned Universal Blue, and that was a question that Bill and I were having before, just a couple of weeks ago. Like, what is Universal Blue actually? So I understand it's an organization, building Fedora and kind of these cloud native container repositories. Is that right?
Yep, yep.
Okay.
Universal Blue is this org that George Castro started that has the explicit goal of pushing cloud native tech. So part of Bazzite's initial development was me finding one of George's videos on the topic and being interested in, making something based on that. In turn, George found me, which is why Bazzite is now under the Universal Blue umbrella. The way Universal Blue works is under that umbrella, they make all these different base images. So they take Fedora, make changes to it to make it a little bit better, and produce an image. And then in turn, Bazzite consumes that image and produces Bazzite. Essentially, they are our upstream in this arrangement. But from a community standpoint, Universal Blue's number one stated goal is to try and prove that this model of the Linux desktop not only can work, but is the future of the Linux desktop.
So when you say this model of the Linux desktop, and you're talking about, are you talking about this cloud native thing that you keep saying? Is that what you
Yes.
mean?
Yes.
Okay, so my audience or our audience, they're going to hear cloud native, and I think most of them will probably think, oh, that means it's running somewhere else and sending the information to my system. That's not what's actually happening, right? We're getting our streams crossed in this case. Is that correct?
That's where the native part of cloud native comes in. The cloud part is you're taking technologies typically used in the cloud. So, a massive company like Netflix, Facebook, Microsoft might use this tech in the back end to run their servers, but we're doing it natively. We're taking this cloud technology and using it to build a better desktop.
Gotcha. Just wanted to make sure everyone's on the same page.
Absolutely.
Yep.
So you've been working on it for a while now. What kind of roadblocks are you running into when it comes to developing Bazzite?
It's pretty easy. Part of this model kind of gets rid of all of the typical roadblocks you'd see in a Linux desktop. The main things we deal with day to day are regressions. Most recently, there was a problem with the Linux kernel that broke a lot of AMD hardware in a very bad way. And on our end, once we identified that, it was a matter of a few line change in our container file to hold back the Linux kernel. Just make sure our users got the last previous good release for as long as they needed to, wait for the problems to resolve, and update them. So, from our perspective, mainly it's support, right? Like we can only support the things we make, and the things we don't make, we can essentially package up what works on our system for others.
Yep. And in terms of like what you're potentially working on, I had a question about like ARM, right? So like I know that obviously Windows is investing in ARM, Valve is investing in ARM. What are the plans there? Do they exist for Bazzite or more broadly?
Yeah, we're working on it. We have some various test hardware now that we can use to get that up and running. Valve has an ARM native version of Proton that we're eager to play with. So, as upstream kind of gets in line, we'll definitely be putting out some ARM images to play with. I can't really promise what the performance will be like because x86 translation is what it is, but so far it looks quite promising.
So you said that you have like some testing hardware there. Is it stuff that other manufacturers, and you don't have to name anybody, but are other manufacturers reaching out to help you with this? Hey, get your stuff working on my hardware?
Yeah, we've had quite a few people reach out. It's been kind of an amazing process.
That's awesome. And you're saying that as though you've been getting bigger along this path. I looked at like the GitHub, and in the README, there's like a big spike in terms of stars. Like I think it was in like January of this year, where like people were starring it steadily, and then all of a sudden it just like went way up. What happened around there?
Let's see. January. That was a Hacker News article. Someone else posted it, and it just exploded overnight, and our star count went vertical for a short period of time. That one was really cool.
That's amazing. Yeah.
You're gonna have to explain stars to the Bills of the world, guys. Nobody knows what you're talking about.
It's just like a bookmark, right? So like when you're on GitHub, you can star a project, basically bookmarking it for later if you want to contribute to it, or if you're just interested in it and want to follow what's going on.
Yeah, or a lot of people don't even use it that way. It's the developer version of a Facebook like.
This is true. Yeah. Yes.
Okay, that makes sense. Very good. Has Valve had anything to say to you about your project?
They have not communicated with me personally, but we've seen them talk about it, so at least they're aware. I think most recently Digital Foundry did a piece on Bazzite, and there was
They
a
did.
Valve developer talking in their comment section and retweeting just to kind of reiterate some of their points. So at the very least, they're aware of us.
So you at this point now, you're not like, because you guys are doing everything is like open source, right? So like they can't step in and say, "Hey, that's ours. You can't do that." Like they kind of said something along those lines with Hollow ISO, because Hollow ISO was doing. I this is, my memory's not great, so maybe I'm remembering something wrong. But I felt like Hollow ISO did something, and then Valve was like, "You're not allowed to do that." And I was wondering if you had heard anything about that.
I'm not privy to that. It might be down to them using various repos that might have been private or update services or something. As far as Valve's packages, they put the license in the actual package build script. So the stuff of theirs that we've taken, we at least know is of a permissive license, and the couple things we don't, we handle in a different way, just to make sure we're
Mm-hmm.
not breaking any potential license terms that may come in the future.
Speaking of Valve, like Bill mentioned it at the top, right? Like a lot of people are waiting kind of for SteamOS for all, and to them, I recommend just trying Bazzite, right? Like it's excellent, and they it it even solves some problems that SteamOS has, as you were alluding to, right? But uh, if you were in their shoes, what do you think are the challenges that Valve is probably seeing when it comes to creating an operating system that anyone can use, right, and not just to a specific hardware?
Yeah, I mean, a big thing is support, right? Um, Without a doubt, we're cheating. We piggyback off of Fedora.
For
So
sure.
all the
Yeah.
work that Red Hat and the Fedora project put into making their OS great, we get for free, and
Yep.
we get to utilize it. Valve's in a different position. They're based off of Arch, which is bleeding edge, and they're doing snapshots of it with these, in-house changes on top of those snapshots. If they want to go, very public and expand to the level of hardware that we're choosing to support, they would need to hire on hundreds of people to support that effort, or bring in some very, very large contractors.
Yep.
Which is why I think they're probably aiming for handhelds first, other than the Steam Deck as a support target, because that's a much smaller footprint for them to have to deal with and support long term.
Right.
Well, plus they're all of the handhelds as of right now, outside of I think the MSI Claw, they're all AMD based.
Yep.
So
Yep.
that makes things a lot easier. Like right now, one of the issues with SteamOS is that they don't have any NVIDIA drivers. So when you're piggybacking off Fedora, does Fedora have those AMD or those non AMD drivers that are able to be used in Bazzite?
Not out of the box, and that's just because of what the NVIDIA drivers are. They are closed source and proprietary, meaning the community can't really support them in any way, shape, or form. Any bug is an NVIDIA bug, and the terms of that license mean it's much harder for them to justify shipping. But the Fedora community has long solved this problem. There's multiple different repos that take NVIDIA's closed source drivers and package them for Fedora, and that's what we do. Right now we're using Negativo as our base. Anytime they update their NVIDIA driver, it automatically gets added to our NVIDIA images, and people get to use them.
So like right now on your website, it says, supports NVIDIA, but you and I were talking before we actually started, and you mentioned that like it doesn't work with game mode. Can you explain that to people? Because there's a lot of people who have NVIDIA hardware and they're like, I want to run SteamOS or Bazzite, but I don't have AMD.
Yeah. Well,
Can you give them any hope?
this is one of the big shames of the hardware scape in Linux right now. Intel and AMD are both gold star, right? They are built into the Linux kernel. They work out of the box. There's nothing anyone needs to do. I mean, I would call that better than Windows. I don't even have to install a driver. It just works. NVIDIA has stayed closed source. There is no open source alternative for them. No viable one, anyway. there's one that exists, but it can't reclock the GPU due to hardware DRM on those cards. So the only method for NVIDIA is to install their proprietary driver, which is closed source. So any bug it has can't be fixed. Valve makes a software called GameScope. That is the compositor or the display engine that powers game mode. And GameScope is low level. It does a lot of talking directly to the GPU, a lot of careful work like that the NVIDIA driver, as it is today, can't handle. It will crash, it will break, it just doesn't work. And the only people that can fix that, due to how it's built, are NVIDIA. And they've spent a year promising to fix it and not fixing it.
Do they show any sign of changing anytime soon? I ask because, like, with their kind of, endeavor into like data centers and things like that, they seem to be slightly embracing open source more at least on that side. And that reminds me of sort of like Microsoft's journey, sort of getting into Azure and embracing open source more as a result. Does NVIDIA show any sign of that as far as you can tell?
They have been getting better.
Okay.
As of now, they have a kernel module that could actually potentially be upstreamed one day. Their actual driver stuff in user space is still closed source, but at least the kernel module is where it needs to be for enterprise. And they're doing more work to support Waylands. Every release gets a little better. Unfortunately, GameScope is still broken. That's kind of one of the most complicated Wayland compositors out there. But they're moving in the right direction. There's a good chance. At this point now, even if they fail to deliver, there are finally open source efforts in development. The NVK project's the most notable one. So as that probably over the next year gets performant and starts to actually kind of run like the NVIDIA driver does, that might be the best path forward, because then it's all open source like it is for AMD now today.
So this doesn't seem like it's a problem that you would be able to, like you and your team or whoever else is working on Linux would be able to fix before Valve. It seems like both you and anybody else doing Linux stuff and Valve are all waiting for NVIDIA to do whatever it is that they need to do, and nobody can push them to do it, and nobody can do it for them. Is that my understanding is correct?
Yeah, we are all in the same boat. The only thing Valve has over us is they are in a better position to push NVIDIA. And I'm sure they are behind the scenes, but, who really knows?
For Bazzite, going back to Bazzite, like there is a lot of focus in a way that I personally enjoy on Steam, right? Like the game mode and things like that. So it's not tightly coupled, but that's, it's the recreation of that SteamOS experience. Whereas it seems like I don't know too much, but I understand that Playtron, for example, is trying to build like a more robust front end for beyond Steam, right? And is that something that you would explore for Bazzite, or your team is exploring for Bazzite?
I'd say we're pretty married to how Valve does things. Game mode is what it is, and it's extendable. So if we need more out of it, we can. But Playtron's method of essentially building their own game mode like front end is certainly interesting, and I'm excited to see what they do with it.
Yeah.
So let's get a little background on you. What's your background in software development that you did before you did all of this stuff?
Yeah. Well, I'm a lifelong software engineer. Even as a kid, right? Like 11-year-old me, I was making Half-Life mods just in my spare time for fun. The one I'm most proud of was called City 17 Episode 1. That was a alternative telling of the Half-Life 2 Episode 1 storyline with all of these really cool, advanced graphics features that no other source mod did, like sun rays, parallax mapping. Definitely check it out. There's pictures and stuff out there. But that got me my first job in the game industry. I was invited to work on interdimensional games on a game called Consortium. And, I bounced around the game industry for a while, eventually left for personal reasons and moved on to web development. I did that for 10 years, really exciting stuff, taxes and company logic and all that.
That's what I do.
And then, toward the tail end of that, I kind of stumbled into Bazzite as the side project. It was, all stuff that I had been working on throughout the pandemic and kind of acquainting myself to, and the stars aligned just the right way. And that brings me to where I am today. Currently, I am a Linux community engineer at Microsoft.
I love that. So that again kind of goes to show like Microsoft is invested in Linux and in open source. Kind of what do you like? What is your, I guess, day to day in that? Like, what does a Linux community engineer do?
It's mostly work with upstream. I'm under the Azure banner, so it's Linux servers primarily, and it's working with upstream projects to submit changes in a way that is mutually beneficial. Definitely a big change from the way things used to be.
Yeah, for sure.
Going back to City 17, is there an episode 2? We all know there's not an episode 3.
Nah, just the one. And unfortunately, we never got to finish it. Life gets ahead of you. But we did release the source code for that, so I think there's a lot of source mods now based on that work at the very least.
That's awesome.
Very cool.
Swelter is one that I'm aware of. That one's on Steam.
Okay. Wait, is City 17 on? Like, is that playable still?
Probably not. I think it's been broken by engine updates since then, because that would have released like 2011.
Right, and we just had the update to Half-Life 2, so...
Yeah, so if someone got it working, it's probably broken again.
Oh, well, that's how it goes.
You described getting like all the work that Fedora does for free, right? Like sitting on the shoulders of giants, so to speak. And
Yep.
To that, there's another XKCD, right? Like the dependency one, where like everything is like hinging on that one little pillar, holding everything up. This is more for the software dev geeks, but like, who is that to you? Who are those like projects or maintainers that are just holding up everything?
It's one person on GitLab. Their handle is evlav, which is just Valve backwards. And they have the grueling job of taking Valve's packages and making nice, organized repositories for them, since Valve has not done that yet.
That's amazing. Shout out to evlav.
Yeah, thank you very
awesome.
much for your work. We could not exist without you.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of not being able to exist without somebody else, what can the NerdNest audience do to help make Bazzite better? What is it that other people who are not developers can do to help you guys?
It's feature requests and bug reports. We take every one of them seriously, and they're always appreciated. If you're willing to go the extra mile, our code base is very easy to walk through, and not all of it is, high level, hard to work with codes. A lot of it's just bash scripts. If you're willing to make some easy little thing, like one contributor gave us a script to install just one piece of software, by all means, PR it. We're never, ever going to make fun of you for a PR we don't accept. We're thankful for them.
Yeah. I'm going to not second that, but I'll say like just even as a software developer, right? Like when I get into code bases that I'm not familiar with, I'm like, oh, I don't think I should do this, right? But like, it can be as small as like updating a README, or if you have like a public-facing website with the repo in the back end or repo available, maybe it's like fixing a typo, right? And that can't. I know that there are some maintainers that hate that sort of stuff, like just small PRs, but I think just trying it is better than not.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, we want to get as many people in as we can, and even our documentation repo is just markdown files. We'll take anything.
Yep.
Right. So I'm looking over at this screen over here, which has like the questions that we wanted to ask, and you can't see it, but I can see it that Rich pasted his questions in using Markdown. So like it's got Markdown stuff in there, and I don't really know what Markdown is, but I kind of know what Markdown is. Mostly it's typing without using a mouse, I think.
It's super intuitive. It's just a way of writing like formatted text files, right? Formatted documents, but in just like plain text. So like a heading is just like a hashtag, right? So like I say that because that's all READMEs are written in Markdown. So just learning, these little markups it's fairly simple and intuitive.
Yep. So what's next for Bazzite?
It's a great question. Mainly right now it's just kind of keeping things running, right? We just did the huge update from Fedora 40 to 41. So now it's getting ready for 42 and just following along with improvements, in the meantime.
All
Very
right,
cool.
settle a debate. KDE or GNOME? You don't have to answer that, but yeah.
I think
Have I?
they're both. I'm going to buck the trend here. They're both good.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I have
agree.
no problem
I
with
agree.
either. I
Yeah.
use GNOME on all of my hardware because I like that user experience, but I still use KDE on my Steam Deck. I use KDE on my home theater PC. They're both good for different reasons. It's down to preference.
Yep.
And this is one I might actually know. Let me know if I get this wrong, guys. So, when you boot into desktop mode on a Steam Deck, you boot into KDE, which is their desktop environment, which is basically like, the start button and all that stuff. When you install Bazzite on a piece of hardware, like, for instance, I did it on my ROG Ally X, and you boot into desktop mode, you get booted into GNOME, and things look a little, well, I don't know if it's GNOME, but things look a little bit different. And so things are not exactly in all of the same places that you're used to, but they're just different graphical user interfaces for interacting with Linux, so you don't have to type in command line nonsense. Am I getting that right?
Close. This changed very recently. The initial release of Bazzite was KDE only, and we ported Valve's themes. So installing Bazzite and SteamOS and going to the desktop would actually be completely identical.
Oh, mine looks weird.
But no, KDE just did this huge update to KDE 6 that made a ton of improvements and also changed a lot of their user experience. We followed that. So now if you install SteamOS, you're getting KDE 5, Bazzite is KDE 6, and optionally it's GNOME 47.
Yeah, I was gonna say you could have downloaded the GNOME image, right? And if you downloaded the GNOME image, you're gonna get the GNOME interface.
Right.
And
or you're getting KDE 7, and that will look different enough to be like, hey, what's going on here?
So we should look forward to probably what will happen in the future is when Valve updates again, maybe next year or something, they might move up to KDE 7 like you guys are. So you're ahead of the curve.
Yeah, there's evidence they're doing that, and we updated their themes to KDE 7, so there's a chance they catch up and look exactly like we do today.
So you're saying there's a chance. Awesome. Kyle, where can people find you and your stuff and anything else that you want to shout out right now?
All of my links are on my personal GitHub. That's probably the best place to check. Shout out wise, I just want to say thanks to all the other Linux distros in this space. We would not exist without Nobara, without CachyOS, without Chimera OS, or even Jovian Nix. That might be new to everyone. That's essentially a Nix OS version of what we are.
Oh.
Thank you to all of those projects. All of you have been incredibly helpful and just so willing to share, what it is you work on and do. And I'm glad that we can be in a position to give back.
And links to his stuff are going to be in the description down below, so make sure that you click on that. Go check out his stuff, and hey, maybe even you could mark down or mark up a GitHub PR. I don't know what I just said, but I said something. It's time to fight. It's these guys are going to fight. They're going to argue, and I opened up my phone and I looked at my phone, and I had, I think it must have been 300 messages on Discord of these two going back and forth arguing over this thing, and I was just laughing my ass off reading through it. And then after a while, I said, you know what? I want to hear them talk about it instead. So, Rich, give people a little bit of background, and then Russ and I are going to enjoy watching Carrie and Rich fight.
What's funny about the fight too is that he and I do this all the time, and what you'll notice is that our positions are not that different. It's just we like to do this for whatever reason. So there's an update to the antitrust lawsuit against Valve that was filed by Wolfire Games. I think now there's two main named plaintiffs. It's Wolfire and Dark Cat, which I think Dark Cat is a VR company. I don't know much about them. But the update is that the judge has made like two. It's still very early, but these two rulings. One of the rulings is that they granted the class certification. So the court has granted the class certification. That means that now this is a class action lawsuit. The class includes any developer that's been paid out since 2017. I think that's effectively what it is. So that's the first thing, and basically that's a pretty big milestone for the plaintiff. It means that they can proceed as a class action, and for Valve it means that if they lose, they're gonna have to pay a lot of developers, right? The second thing that happened is that the judge denied Valve's motion to exclude expert testimony from a Dr. Schwartz. I don't think it would be good for me to go over what that testimony is, other than to say I say that because it's a large document. This is a short podcast, and I'm going to go based off of recollection, right? But essentially, Dr. Schwartz in his testimonies is saying why is building the case for the plaintiff, right? Like these are the models that would happen in what they call a but-for system, which is if it weren't for Steam for Valve doing what they're doing, this is what a more competitive market would look like, including like the commission rates and other stores that would exist and stuff like that. So they built out this model. Valve tried to exclude that testimony. The judge ruled in favor of the plaintiff, and so that testimony is in. That doesn't mean it's good testimony or whatever. It's just admissible. So kind of two major events here, and not on Valve's side. So that's the context. The argument was my position is, and this is what I said. If Valve does have a PMFN policy, so PMFN is Platform Most Favored Nation, and basically it just means that Valve is attempting, allegedly, to enforce price parity and content parity. So you are effectively not allowed to sell a game for cheaper or with better content somewhere else. And that can be for either key shops, so like Humble and Green Man Gaming and Fanatical, or it can be for non-key shops, so Epic Game Store, GOG, itch.io. So my position is, if Valve does have that policy, and they're trying, no, that wasn't it. I'm looking at my quotes. I don't see
While
it.
he's looking that up, I will say the whole problem with Humble and key shops, I have no problem with that as a policy when it applies to that, but not when it applies to other stores that don't use Steam keys. Go ahead, Rich.
Yeah, I didn't find a quote, but the point is, if they do have that policy, that's lame. They should not have that policy, and basically, so they, I think they claim not to have that policy. There's some evidence that perhaps they do, but I just think that if, for example, Epic Store sucks, we all agree on that, right? Like that is a statement of fact. Epic Store sucks. If the reason Epic Store sucks is because Epic is willing to take a lower cut, then that is a reasonable business model to me, right? Like that exists in other places where stores suck, but they have some other advantage, right? And so if Epic's advantage is they're going to take a lower cut, but they're going to suck, and then you take away that advantage by not letting developers offer games for lower, well, that to me now looks a little sketchy, and I don't like it personally. That's my take, if they're doing that.
So the on the face of it, it doesn't make any sense to me. And so for Epic's side of things, there's other parts there, but the part that doesn't make sense to me is that 95% of all the games that I own on Steam were purchased outside of Steam. And the reason I bought them outside of Steam was because they were cheaper on those key shops than they were on Steam, which seems to say that they don't care if someone prices it cheaper or has a discount code on other sites and having it more expensive on Steam, because I have done it many, many times.
Yeah.
So that's my take, and I could totally believe that the clause does exist, and when they talk to people that they do say that, but they just say it for saying reasons because they can't make it like the Wild West and just be like, hey, let everything go nuts. I do think that they should just let it go nuts because I don't think it matters, right? Because everyone's still going to use Steam because Steam's just a better platform. Perhaps in the olden days when things were kind of like, who knows what's going to happen, and all these other digital distributions, like insofar as GOG and Steam, when there was other competition and they were not the dominant force, that they had to step in and say, okay, look, we need to have some type of semblance of, we can't allow anyone to, there's got to be some terms that we can't just be having things unfavorable, because they already do a lot of things that are unfavorable to themselves, but it does benefit Steam itself insofar as Steam keys, right? When a developer makes a Steam key, they don't pay Valve anything. They list it on Fanatical, and then Fanatical says, here's 17% off. And then Fanatical only takes 13% for themselves, right? So Fanatical's eating into their own cost to make it cheaper so that it's attractive for a customer. Hence why I've always bought stuff on key shops. That's how that's how I've always done it. So Valve made no money. I got it cheaper. The developer still got their cut. So this is all saying that the Wolfire thing is he was told that he can't do this because he wanted to sell his game on Epic, but he wanted to sell it lower just so that he got the same amount of money. And when we had that long discussion, like, it was two paths that went for me. Is number one, the whole point that Epic changed their ratio from 3070 to 8812 was to make it more attractive to developers. If a developer is just going to say, I'm going to make the same amount of money so that, I can make it cheaper for someone else, and I'm going to make Epic look better, why does the developer care to make Epic look better? That's a favor to Epic for no reason for them. They're not getting any benefit for it. So they're just championing another store so that it's cheaper, and Epic gets the same amount, the developer got the same amount, and it just bolstered Epic's services. Now, they could do it. I just don't think a lot of developers actually would, because the whole point of Epic is so that they get more money. So, I don't know. Ultimately, no matter which way you looked at this, on the other side is, if this lawsuit goes and says, Valve, hey, Valve, you were wrong and you're going to have to pay a bazillion people and you can't have this clause anymore. The opposite side of this is that Valve can say, all right, so we have to allow it, which means that we have to price match on everything. And if we have to price match on everything, price matching isn't illegal. Best Buy and Amazon do it all the time. But they're going to price match on the fee, right? On how much they charge. Now, no other store can actually compete because Valve, people are going to be like, oh, it's cheaper over here. Hey, Valve, price match. And Valve's like, yes, sir. And now they just automatically lower their cut. And that store that could have existed will now be squashed out. So in no world does this, if Valve loses or wins, like, literally, I don't know what good all of this is, because I'm still getting games cheaper off of Steam today than on Steam, which I like, this whole lawsuit is just like, I don't even know what's going on. Like, it's just like, do you just want to beat up on Valve because they're just the big guy? And I get it. I do get it that they shouldn't be doing this, but at the same token, going through the whole spiel of it, I don't know, it doesn't make any sense to me.
So let me jump in with a perspective from the developer side. So I obviously never published a game, but I did publish 3 books. And one of the things with my first book, it was really hard to kind of break out, get exposure, all that kind of stuff. I was in a niche as well. I did like gluten-free cookbooks, so it was like even harder to get, mainstream appeal. There was a company or like this kind of website where they would offer up ebooks, not as bundles, but in like huge sales, like a Steam Autumn sale, but for ebooks. And they approached me and they're like, hey, we want to sell your Kindle version for 99 cents, basically, of your cookbook, which costs $35 or whatever. And it sells for $10 on Kindle for the Kindle version. And so I had to get permission, I had to give them permission. I had to get permission from my publisher as well. And they said, okay, my publisher said, you can do this, but you're not going to get any royalties from this. Like, they're going to sell for 99 cents each, but we are still going to take our cut of it, and you're not getting anything, basically. And so I said, that's fine. You know what I mean? So putting that into perspective as a developer, like putting a game that you are selling for $10 on Steam, and then you can also sell it for, say, $4 on Epic. just gives you more exposure. And I think there are enough small individual developers who really want to have that kind of exposure, and they don't care that they're not making as much money or making even any money. It's all about getting the creation that they made out into the world. And that's the way I did it. I was like, I don't care if this makes, another 1,000 people read my book who may actually think, you know what, I want the physical copy and I may make some money some other way. You know what I mean? So I can see this perspective where it is a boon for the developer, no matter what, to be able to price their games however they want on any store. And so I understand the idea of like, well, they're not going to make as much money or whatever. Sometimes it's not about that. It's just about the exposure and getting to that point where there is finally an avalanche, where it all just starts happening on its own, And so that's kind of the way I see it as far as this whole thing, and why I do hope that if Valve has a policy like this, that it gets axed because of this lawsuit.
Yeah. Addressing, I like that point, Russ. Addressing some of Kerry's points. So key shops, right? You mentioned that you've gotten games for cheaper on Fanatical and Green Man Gaming, and so a couple points to that. Number one is that, like, first of all, if you can get, if broadly consumers can get games for cheaper elsewhere, this case is going to be shut like quickly, right? Like, this is evidence that Valve can have and can present pretty quick, easily. So like, which means that they don't have that policy, and that would be wonderful, right? Like, that's okay with me. But if they don't, then what does that mean, right? So like, if Valve is unable to win based on those grounds, like how would that like shape your opinion of this clause? Which I guess, your opinion is not that different from mine. You're saying if they are saying this, they should stop saying this. so I guess
they shouldn't say, like, Valve has always like just been like, they have won because they cared more about doing features and making sure people wanted to use Steam rather than anything else. When Epic started money hatting a bunch of exclusives, Valve didn't fire back and start money hatting exclusives. They were just like, okay, like just all right, whatever.
Yeah, that's fine.
Like,
right.
Ubisoft said, we're taking our games off of Steam. They're like, yeah, okay.
They always come back.
Yeah, you always came back, right?
Yeah.
Like, all of them came back. Now, 2K, they're like, you know what? Let's just get rid of our launcher. It's a support cost to us. I don't know why we would have done this. We were hoping that we were going to make all this money. Everyone just uses Steam, and this is a waste of time and money for us. Let's just get rid of the launcher. And everyone rejoiced. And that's Steam. Like, you look at from 10 feet away, you're like, that's what Valve does. When I hear the clause that they have, I can believe it's there from the lawyery, businessy type of people that would have like put that little clause in the thing, that no one that is making the decisions like what they were going to do as a company were like, oh, should we retaliate? And Gabe is like, no, we're not going to do anything. We're just going to do what we want.
So the last time that you guys had this argument, like, Rich posted the emails, and the emails were like, if you do this, we may have to take your game off of Steam, allegedly, or whatever. Right, Rich?
Yeah, so there are a couple hundred emails, so there's a lot. And they all vary, right? So, like, it'll be hard to, from our perspective, not from the court system, but from our perspective, where some of it is redacted, including the people who sent the emails, right? We know, I'm not going to say it because it's been since redacted, we know of at least one person from within Valve that sent emails. It's unclear if it was just that one person that sent all of those hundreds of emails, or if there were a few people at Valve that sent some of those emails. But the point is, yeah, there are a couple hundred emails, and they vary, right? So, like, sometimes it'll be about free games, games that were free elsewhere. Sometimes it'll be about games that were bundles elsewhere. Sometimes it'll be about games that were cheaper elsewhere. Sometimes it'll be about games that had more content elsewhere. And then even within that, sometimes it'll be where we won't promote the game, right? It won't be one of our weekend deals. Sometimes it'll be we will delist a game. Very rarely will it go that far, but they have threatened to delist a game, right? So those threats exist, and that's what I think all of us agree, at least in terms of all of our agreement, at least for non-Steam key shops, that they should not be trying to dictate what other stores, how developers can price their games on other stores.
I agree, 100%.
Yeah.
Kerry, do you agree with that?
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
Russ, do you agree with that?
Yeah.
Well, this fight sucks.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's a sensible position, right? Like, I don't think it's that wild. I mean, like, the comments will differ. Some of the comments will differ, right? Like, some people will say it costs 30%, but you get this like enormous user base. For me, that's like saying, like, if I don't, like, Chrome has a monopoly, right? And I'm not saying Chrome needs to be broken up or whatever. I'm saying Chrome is in a market dominant position, and that means that if I develop a website, it has to be Chrome compatible. If not, I just lose 99%. That's a bit of an exaggeration. That was Safari.
Like 80%.
Yeah. But that's a serious problem, right? And so the choice is a false choice, in my opinion, because you can't release a PC game and not release it on Steam. That's just not a choice. That's not an option.
Yeah.
They keep trying, and they always, just like Carrie said, they always come back because it's just not tenable. People like to be able to talk to their friends, and it's easy to do on Steam.
There's a part of me that just doesn't like because if I wasn't able to get games cheaper, then I'd be like, oh yeah, someone's got to take Valve to court on this. But I have been for years, because that's like, I literally have 10,000 games on Steam, and I never bought them on Steam. So
the thing I'll push back on that with is that sometimes, and like, we would have to go through the data to see for every game on Steam, which is a lot of games on Steam, to see where this lands. But what I will say is that sometimes it will be cheaper for 3 months, right? And so, like, part of that parity clause is not that we have to be the cheapest first. It's just like we have to have a similar deal within some time frame. So like 90 days, 30. I don't know exactly what the time frame is, and I don't know that Valve knows or if it's official. But like, if it's cheapest on Fanatical, but then 60 days later it's that same price on Steam. Yeah.
I mean, maybe, but like Green Man Gaming, when that site first came out, the website was atrocious. There was like an MS Paint mascot of the alien. Like, it was atrocious. But everyone bought games from there because every new game that came out was 27% off. And the reason it was 27% off is Green Man Gaming took that 30% and only got 3%. But they did that to get people to come and shop on Green Man Gaming.
Yeah.
But I don't remember games being 27% off within 3 months on Steam. Maybe they were.
What year was that? Do you remember?
This is like 2013, 2014. This is like
Yeah.
after, right? Like 2010 was like Steam sales bonanza. Like, oh, you like, here's IDOS. Here's the entire IDOS collection of PC games for $50. And I was like, oh, okay. Like,
Yeah.
Right. It was crazy.
yeah.
Reminder though, the class only includes developers that were paid out since 2017. So like, it seems, haven't looked at the documents in a while, so I could be wrong on this, but it's possible that they're alleging that it kicked in this clause more severely starting in 2017.
I could see that, and if that's the case, then yeah, I would like Valve to lose here, because I would like Green Man Gaming to go back to 27% discounts. That would make me very happy. Yeah. So that, if that's the case, then 100% they should lose. But there's a part of me that I see how, you can be mad at a lot of different corporations because a lot of them do really scummy stuff, and
Yes.
when I look at Valve, and they are the dominant PC person, but I don't feel like Valve got there through malice and being just like Microsoft, like how Microsoft was in like the 80s and 90s, just like stomping everyone down and trying to, like, have their control. Valve was just trying to make things better, and by making things better, people kept on using it. So I don't know, I feel like there's this, I don't know, this connotation that we have to go after Valve because they're the big baddie. And that's the part that, I know no one's saying that, but there's a part there that I feel like is just lingering in the air. Like, oh, someone's got to do something. But if Green Man Gaming hasn't had, like, Fanatical has only been doing like 17%, but 17% to me is always like, well, if they're only going to make 13%, that's basically what Epic's deal is, right? Like, they don't have much profit that they're swinging in there. Like Helldivers 2, I got 17% off when that launched, and I got it from Fanatical. So yeah, I don't know.
I think one thing to keep in mind, and we will I guarantee we will see this in the comments of this video, is that there are people who constantly think that Valve can do no wrong.
Yeah.
And there's people who constantly think that because Valve is the dominant force, they need to be taken down a peg.
Yeah.
And the real answer is somewhere in between. And anytime that I can't speak for anybody else on here, but anytime I've been critical of Valve on my channel, people come out of the woodwork and they get real mad at me. And I think it's perfectly reasonable to say, it's okay to put your game on a bunch of different platforms, and the person who made the game or the publisher who made the game should be in control of that price, as long as they are not using a Steam key anywhere else. Valve shouldn't say anything about what somebody does on any other store. And that's all we're really saying here. And I think everybody agrees with that. But there's going to be people who are angry that we are saying that Valve shouldn't be able to tell Walmart how much to sell, I don't know, a pair of shoes for, because some people are just tribalistic for some reason.
The way I see it, video games are art, and the artist should be dictating the value of their own art. And that's just what it comes down to for me.
I like that.
All right. Well,
Yep.
We talked a lot about lawyerly stuff, but we're not done yet, because Nintendo is going after a 200,000 member, good gravy, that's a lot of people, a 200,000 member subreddit called Switch Pirates, and they want to subpoena Reddit in order to identify members who worked with an alleged Switch pirate. Now, full transparency, we are constantly railing against Nintendo because they do assholey things when it comes to lawsuits and
Carrie's going nuts.
I know.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm like thinking in my head like the board meeting that was there when they were like, so we're gonna sue 200,000 people. And
Right.
that one scene from like I don't know why it popped in my head just now, but it was like the Indiana Jones guy that going choo choo, like just going nuts.
I think of it more like that scene in The Professional when Gary Oldman says, "Get everybody," and they're like, "Everybody," and he goes, "Everyone,"
Yeah.
and like he screams at it, and that's what happened in that boardroom. They said, "We're going to sue everybody."
It's too funny.
And then somebody in there said, "Who do you mean, everybody?"
Yeah. Did he just say everyone?
I have a take on this. We all know Nintendo are asshats, right? When it comes to this stuff, right?
Yeah.
But my take is a little funny because in like rap music, right? So like there's been a funny thing happening in these last 10 years where like on Instagram, right, like rappers and just people will sort of like advertise the crimes they've committed, right? Like showing off the money that they have
So
when right, when they don't have a job or something like that, right? Like, and you probably shouldn't do that because that can be used as evidence, and also prosecutors have been trying to use like rap lyrics in court cases and things like that, and so like all the old school, the like veteran class are like, stop doing that, like don't stop committing the crimes, but stop advertising that you're committing the crimes, right? And like I don't understand. I when I first saw the Switch Pirate subreddit, I'm like, what is this?
Right.
Like, why would you put a subreddit, create a username in like the post Snowden days, knowing what the CIA and the NSA is capable of? Why would you just do that? Why would you advertise that you do that? And like there are the Twitter accounts that are like basically just, here's how you pirate. These are the VPNs that you should be using and the links you should be like, oh, okay.
To be clear here, this is an
Go ahead.
FBI issue, not CIA or NSA.
Thank you.
I
Yeah,
just wanted
this
to
is
clarify that.
Yeah, that's the right jurisdiction. You're correct.
The thing is so first off, if you are pirating things that are currently available, if you are downloading stuff where you could easily just go to a store and buy it and bring it home and play it, you're in the wrong. I don't know that Nintendo should sue people like that. The people that I think they should sue are the brick and mortar stores that are breaking street dates. Somebody is uploading shit ahead of time, like, and like that
The distribution.
the people who are distributing that stuff, go after them, absolutely, and I'm sure that that's what's really happening, but that's not nearly as sexy as a headline as Nintendo suing 200,000 pirates.
Yeah.
So once upon a time, like, back in those MP3, Napster, all those days, right? Like, the music companies did come after individuals that were pirating,
Yeah.
and they stopped that. It's very, like, it's not cost effective, all of that stuff. But at least as a measure of, like, don't do this because you could go to jail. Like, it can be pretty effective. So I wouldn't be surprised if this is what Nintendo is actually doing. I mean, like, if you look at the actual, like, game file report, it's not that they're going after the entire subreddit. It's that they're looking for connections to this one person that they're already suing, things like that. So, like, it's a
Right.
lot more nuanced, to your point, Bill. But it seems like Nintendo is going in this way of, like, if you're pirating and you're making it clear, we're not afraid to come after you.
Can you? So I don't. I know probably there's people in the comments who think that I know all about this stuff. Can you explain what the Switch Pirate subreddit does? Like, is it pirated games, like new cartridges of counterfeit games? Like, I don't understand.
I've
like,
never
what
seen
the
it before.
content is.
I don't.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no.
I think we're
I
all
would
the same
assume
boat.
that it's because I haven't. So first off, I don't think anybody here actually has an account on there, so we don't have to worry about that.
From what I've heard, they post encoded links to resources.
Oh, okay. Like basic.
So you click on it, and then it's like you have to type in a password or something, and then it's like, okay, now you can download this thing that you're trying to get. Is that what you mean, Rich?
Yes.
Just links to the files.
Yeah. And that
Gotcha.
encoding is like it's not really encoding, right? Like, you could,
Right.
if someone wanted to investigate it, they could just, it's not even a password. You can easily
Right.
decode what it is.
Yeah. I mean, still going after whatever is going to shake out through that whole thing, because it can't be cost effective going after however many people is going to be there. If Reddit is even going to respond to whatever, who knows? I don't know, but it's there's a part of me that's just, I don't want to, like, victim blame here, but, like, Nintendo could make a better system. They could make a more powerful system. But they chose to make a weaker system so that they can make profit on the hardware from day one. And that has resulted in rampant emulation on current gen stuff with no problem. And they really hate that. And now that the Switch 2 is coming out, they're like, how much more powerful is this? They're like, whoa.
I don't think that's a good argument, honestly.
Yeah,
Like,
it's victim blaming, right? That's all it is. Is like they are ramping up what they're doing because they must feel somewhere along the lines that piracy is at a threshold of this is too much, right? Like, they know that there's piracy that happens in whatever, and they respond to it wherever they can. But this is the first time that I can remember that they're going after potentially 200,000 individuals. I don't recall, like, DS, Game Boy, 3DS flashcards and stuff. They always went after the flashcard maker. They would just go after the guy that would make the thing that could facilitate it. And this is like, if you even thought about looking for a game, we're coming for you. And that's a different line, right? That's another line that they're crossing.
That's a
and
good
that's
point. Like,
that's
the
what
Switch,
we. Go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to point out that people on the Reddit aren't necessarily pirating. Like, I'm sure overwhelmingly they're pirating, but I'm sure there are also people that just, like, hit join because, I don't know, they want to know more about this stuff. I don't know.
Right, yeah. You could just be like, oh, that game, oh, the game. There could be someone that legitimately has zero desire to pirate, but he has that on notification and is like, oh, this game I'm looking forward to, and I just know it got leaked, so now I have to make sure I don't get any spoilers for this game because that
There you go.
leaked, and now I know I need to avoid all mention of this because the next weekend of change is going to be, littered with minefields of revealing whatever. I could see that as an argument. Like if someone just being mindful of what's going on, hyper attentive. But this is the first time that I can recall that they've ever done this, and it seems like at what point, how bad does Nintendo think this is, right? And going back to wrapping this all up, right? Like if Gabe said piracy is a service problem, right? Mm-hmm. Why are people pirating on Switch? Is it just because it's so darn easy to do? This is like whoopsie doodle. I'm emulating Switch. Like, I didn't mean to do that. Like,
Well, okay, so people are emulating Switch games because they want to play it on not the Nintendo Switch. They want
Right.
to play it on more powerful hardware. They can get higher frame rates and stuff like that. And I know that you say if the Switch was more powerful, then they wouldn't be able to do that, and that would disincentivize piracy. But that I don't think is a good argument. But when you say,
oh yeah, it's
why
victim
are
blaming.
people pirating? People are pirating because they're thieves.
But-
That's the reason they're pirating things.
There's a-
Getting a free
Not
game.
why they're emulating things. That's a different thing.
But there's
Because
a
you can
threshold.
buy a game, go home, never even open it, put it on the shelf,
Right.
and then download it off the internet and play it, and you have paid for that game. And I have zero problem with somebody doing that. I'm not going to show them how to do that, but I have no problem with somebody doing that. I don't do that because let's just play on my Switch instead. I don't want to go through all of the extra pain in the ass BS in order to get the
Right.
game to run on my Steam Deck or whatever. That's emulation. Piracy is theft, and that's what those people are doing, in my opinion.
You
Sure.
wouldn't steal a car.
But
You wouldn't download a car.
But to bring it back, this is, and this action from Nintendo is far more than they've ever done before anywhere. So there has to be a reason that has caused this action, right? Like, what was it? Is it just piracy alone, just people pirating on Switch, or is it also because of emulation?
I have a bit of a sister theory. So, like, your theory is basically that they're going to be underpowered again, and
Well, yes, well,
Right.
it will be, but it's
That-
still
right,
gonna be
right,
great.
right.
It's still gonna be great.
So that's what I was going to say. Is I do expect it to be underpowered. So what I'm about to say is not an argument against it being underpowered, but I think the bigger motivation for Nintendo is that Nintendo Switch has already been like exposed, right? Like it's been every way you can hack it, it's been hacked. It doesn't matter what Switch you have, it can be hacked, right? And so I think what Nintendo is trying to do is plug all of the holes that could be vectors for attack on the Switch 2. Regardless of how powerful it is, the Switch 1 is going to be the biggest vulnerability that the Switch 2 has out the gate.
So maybe I hear what you're saying, but do you think that they are just serving a volley of artillery to kind of just blanket the landfill so that someone's like, maybe I shouldn't hack the Super Switch. Whoever would have the means to
Yes.
hack it is going to be like, let me let that stew for a little bit. Let me just not touch that
Yes.
for a little bit, because they seem to be really trigger happy as of late.
Yes, and every vector of like even just emulation, right? Like if even just disregarding piracy and just thinking about emulation, Yuzu is now illegal, right? Like even forks of Yuzu will be targeted based on the precedent that Nintendo has already set. I'm not saying it's actually illegal, but this is precedent that Nintendo has built that they're going to leverage in courts, right? Same for Ryujinx, although it hasn't been challenged in court yet the way Yuzu has. They just took over Ryujinx, but if challenged in court, I'm sure they would argue and have a good chance to win by saying that you cannot, that Ryujinx is illegal, going all the way back to like TPM stuff, right? Like you cannot circumvent technological protection measures.
I feel like this is you remember in Spaceballs when Dark Helmet says shoot a warning shot across his nose, and then he's like, I said across his nose, not up it. That's what it feels like right now.
Do you think Pal World was like a bundle deal with the lawyers?
We already have you on retainer, right? We might as well.
You just get Pal World in there. Just, I don't know how much more it's going to cost us. We're really interested in the Switch stuff, but if you could just kind of like, maybe
Throw that in there.
put
Yeah.
Palworld in there.
That'd
You
be
know, the
insane.
thing is, though, that this is having an effect. Like, they are doing, like, as much as we want to complain about all the things that they're doing or whatever, it's working, like Yuzu and Ryujinx now are just basically dead. I mean, there are people still working on that stuff, but they've just killed that, and that's, it affects things. Like, for example, how much people want to play, like, the Odin 2. So, like, well, it's never going to get any better than it is right now because it's dead, the development of the Switch emulators on it. And so it has a cooling effect, I think. I saw on the main subreddit that I mostly spend my time on, which is the SBC gaming one, which is, about handhelds and whatnot.
Yep.
There are a couple posts where, like, hey, Nintendo's going after this entire subreddit. We need to stop posting any Nintendo footage at all on this subreddit. And that's so different than piracy. That's them just saying, hey, Mario Land 2 looks wonderful on this handheld. That's what they're doing. And they're now saying, and got a lot of upvotes. I'm not of the opinion. Like, I'm not going to show them on my videos because of the 2 strikes thing, which go away in, 12 days. But like that's a whole different story. Like, but it has a cooling effect, and it's working. I mean, they got me to not post any Nintendo footage for 2 months straight. So 3 months straight almost.
Yeah, and as soon as it happened, I stopped posting Nintendo stuff. Like, I no longer, I mean, I still cover their stuff, but I never show any footage. When we talk about it, I never put in B-roll for games that we're talking about. Earlier, Carrie was talking about the new Zelda game. Most of the time, I sit down and for a couple hours, I edit the show and I put B-roll in for whatever it is that we're talking about. That ain't happening with Nintendo stuff because I don't want them coming after me for showing video of their game being played, whether I'm playing it on a Steam Deck or I'm playing it on a Nintendo Switch.
Or even showing a trailer, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Right. It's yeah.
How dare you?
how dare you advertise our games?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
No
just
one.
such a funny thing because I mean I get so much joy from Nintendo games. And I love that my whole channel is about sharing joy, and it's one of those things where I'm like, it's fine.
Right.
Sega's got enough joy as well, so they get a lot of love now.
And they've always been like this. Remember back when they had the stupid Nintendo Ambassador Partner Program or whatever, where you could like
I was in it.
yeah, so was I. You could opt in to show like
Yeah.
their footage, and then they would take some of your revenue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's never worked out. But the only good thing that ever happened there is just because I was in New York, and they always showed New York stuff. When the Switch was coming out, they invited me to the launch event. So that was like the only thing that was ever a positive of being in the creator program. But yeah, it's I don't know. I'm still gonna buy the Super Switch, and I'll still buy Switch games, and maybe I don't know when I would show it. I would have to be like streaming to ever show it. But then even then, like, would you stream a Nintendo game?
No, I wouldn't.
Like, like whispered voices.
Because here's the thing: even if you're not doing anything wrong,
Right.
if you like, we've just been berating Nintendo for the last 10 minutes. They see that on this channel, and then they're like, oh, let's go find some freaking footage of our game on his channel and nail him as a punishment for saying bad things about us.
Right.
Yeah, like it's that's like the worry, right? Like you could be like anyone that is like a Nintendo Switch type of channel, I would be like, oh man, at any given moment, like a few years down the line, if Nintendo's just like, you know what, delete everyone's channel, everyone's going down. I don't want to see it anymore. And it's like, oh, okay. Did he say everyone?
Everyone.
Nice callback. You were going to jump in just then, Rich? I saw you
No,
start
I just
to say
said
no.
everyone.
Okay. Oh, okay. Gotcha.
I was playing his hype man.
There you go. Well, there you have it. I don't know, Nintendo, stop being stupid. Sue
Please.
the people distributing stuff. Let us promote your stuff by showing it off. And emulation is not piracy. Anyway, getting off my soapbox. These guys all have YouTube channels. They've got stuff that they're working on right now. Russ, you just put out a video either today or yesterday about the Tribui brick.
Yeah, so that came out this morning, and Yeah, it's great. It's a neat little handheld. There's a couple flaws with it. It gets hot when playing some of the harder to emulate stuff, but it is amazing all the way up through PS1. And it's got super sharp display, 1024 by 768 resolution on 3.2 inches. It's crazy crisp. And I don't, like, my one failure in making this video, which was like 41 minutes long, is that I didn't do a good enough job capturing how wonderful it is, because I just don't know if a camera can do that, because it's one of those that you have to see to be believed, you know. But yeah, $50-$60 handheld, it's wonderful.
Awesome. Rich, what are you working on, man? Oh, Rich, you had a little celebration, don't you?
Yeah, I got my plaque. Here it is. Hold on.
Woo! Yeah,
That
Hot damn.
that's awesome.
Heck yeah, man.
Congratulations, man.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
yeah, congratulations.
My next video is pretty much what we talked about here.
Go watch it.
You were like, I want some more of that.
Yeah, it's a lot of the same topics. I mean, that's what happened this week, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Carrie, what about you, man? What are you working on?
So I finished up my video on the Pocket 4, which
Yeah, that was fast.
Yeah,
Wow.
well, it's my one video I did with the Duo, where I did like an hour-long video doing every which way, got like, I don't know, 5,000 views. And granted, it's just way too technical. It's just too in the weeds. And so I was like, well, I don't consider it a gaming thing, even though there are people that are going to use it for gaming with like telescopic controllers and stuff. I showed that off. I don't really value it that much for that. Anyway, that was the video I did for the GP Pocket 4. The next video I'm working on is going to be looking at the B-Link GPU dock thing. There's a few things I want to talk about that. The Flux deck dock, whatever they made. They just inverted it, which is dumb because it's like you're blocking the fans on the... Anyway, that's the next video that I'm doing, and I'm probably going to do it more as like fixing Windows to make it work on as a couch
Awesome.
gaming.
I have been... I don't know when this is coming out. Probably not this week, but I've been working on getting Bazzite up and running on the ROG NUC, and it has NVIDIA chips for like the graphics card, so that means it doesn't work in gaming mode. But like that's what I did this morning. Was I sat down and got it all running, and now it's sitting over there downloading my games, so that because I bought a big ass 4 terabyte
SSD?
what the hell are these called again?
NVMe?
Yeah, NVMe. A 4 terabyte NVMe in there, and it's got Bazzite on there, and now it's downloading all the games so that I can, walk people through the process.
That Astrobot song is always stuck in my head. So SSD.
Yes.
It's in the background. SSD. It's just humming in the background, and I just find myself like SSD.
I don't remember that one nearly as much as I remember the one where it's like, "What's your name again?" And I'm like, "Okay, that's the one that just that's the Astrobot song for me."
Nice.
Is where somebody says, "What's your name again?" and then they say Astrobot singing it.
Nice.
That brings us back to the pre-show that you guys didn't get to see, but where we were arguing about whether or not Astrobot was Game of the Year. And I got out, or not Game of the Year, but should be on that list. And I got outvoted. Everybody disagreed with me. I think it belongs on that list. Everybody else was like, nah, it wore a little thin for me.
Direction of the game direction of the year, it belongs there. Game of the year, not quite up to that level. It's great, but not quite up to that level.
My sensibilities are also different, right? Like my games of the year are like Sulaco or Celico, Balatro, Shady Knight. I've just gotten started on Shady Knight, but it's really good. Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown. So like those are my games of the year.
Which
Very cool.
Are we talking about that 2 weeks from now?
Yeah, so not next week, but the week after, we're going to do the NerdNest Game Awards, where, and the way it'll work, and I'll re-explain it at the beginning of that episode, is we've got some categories. If you guys think of some categories that I haven't thought of, let us know, or let me know. But each one of us will nominate a game, and then we will talk about our nominations on that episode, and then I'm going to make a Google form so that everybody who watches can pick, and you guys pick the winners. We're the nominators. You guys end up picking the winners, and so I'm sure that some of us will be very upset when we actually look and see who wins in our categories on our show.
That's funny. I like that. That's a good idea.
And that's going to do it for this episode of the NerdNest podcast. Thank you for hanging out with us for a very long time.
Yes.
Hope you guys have a good one. Stay rad.